Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first concurrent session of the day, making sure the students learn before they take the exam in Principles of Micro. Our presenter today is Gabriel Martinez from Ave Maria University. Gabriel Martinez is an associate professor of economics and director of online learning at Ave Maria University in Florida, which he joined in 2002. He earned his bachelor's from the University of South Carolina, an MA and PhD in economics from the University of Notre Dame, and an online master's in educational technology leadership from George Washington University. Most of his research is on topics of university education and financial crises. An American and Ecuadorian citizen, he is married and has 6 children. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Appreciate it. So this presentation in a way is a personal story. Last year, I was ready to teach an online class for I taught online classes before, but this was the first time I was going to teach this particular class, a Principles of Microeconomics class. And I basically wanted to do a decent job at it. And all of a sudden, my son signs up for the class. And knowing my son, I decided that I maybe needed to up my game a little bit. And so the result was that what you're going to see today is the result of my effort to make the class better, to make sure that it fits the needs of the students. So, by the way, if I'm really curious to find out who's the audience. So if you could, in the Q&A, write down where you work and what you do at that institution, I'd really appreciate it. So if you think about here's regular class, right? And when I say regular classes, just your normal classes in which you have tests and you have homework and people attend classes. A normal class, and it's a relatively small school, Ave Maria. We have about 1,100 students, and so 181 students over a 3-year period is for us a relatively large sample, even though it's not really. But anyway, so for us, it's a lot of people. So what I did here, what you see in the screen, is predicted grades versus their actual grade, right? So what you see is that some students are going to do well almost no matter what. Then everybody has family emergencies, everybody has health crises, everybody has cars that break down. But if you came in with a pretty strong GPA, with the right classes and preparation, et cetera, you probably did well in the class anyway. And there's more spread in these results as you go down the predicted grade. And if you're predicted to get a C+ or less, you know what? Who knows what might happen? You might get an A, you might fail the class or withdraw or something like that. So if you think about what determines this variation, why is it that some people do a lot better than you would predict? And you can imagine that a big part of the determinant of why people do better or worse is simply they have better study habits or they have worse study habits, right? Some people will just show up to class and expect to be taught, right? Might not be doing a whole lot, but they're just waiting for them to be fed the information. So if your goal is to make sure the students are actually prepared for the test, right? And when they show up to the test, they feel that they are confident for the test. When they walk out of the test, they say, you know what, that's fair. That test was fair. Whether or not they did well or badly, right? Yeah, I probably got a C, and that's probably what I deserve. That's a good test, right? That's a good testing strategy. If it gives them a good, if they feel they're properly prepared, and they feel that the test actually did test what they were supposed to know. Which means that for some people, the kind of strategy that I put together that I'm going to describe is probably going to be unnecessary. Some students have wonderful study habits, and that's why they're earning A's, because they really know how to arrange their life. And for some people, it will really help, and some people it will make them realize, wow, it's not that the teacher was unfair, it's not that the material was above me, it's simply that I did not put in the effort. And some people put in a lot of effort into the wrong things, or they spend a lot of time just rereading the study guide without actually putting anything of themselves. And they say, well, you know what? I reread the study guide 7 times. I should have gotten an A. it'll be revelatory for other people. That's the idea. So my prediction here, so to speak, coming in, is that this would increase both the average grade and also the spread throughout the distribution of students. I'm contrasting the strategy that I'll describe again to a coast and cram strategy, right? I'll pay as little attention as I can, minimizing my marginal cost of attention. And then the night before, I'll just spend a lot of time studying. And the result is that I probably will be studying the wrong things because I never really self-tested. Or what might be happening is that you have a student that really never understood the difference between a shift of the curve and a movement along the curve, never really got that, but thinks that he got it. He thinks he got it, but never really understood it, and shows up for the test and is not really prepared. So what I want to make sure is that in my classes, you can't move forward in the class unless you've mastered these basic building blocks. Okay, so I'm drawing to some degree into some of the educational psychology literature here. One important finding, kind of repeated finding in educational psychology, is that the more you space study sessions, instead of studying everything the day before the test, if you've been studying for the last month, for the last couple of weeks, and you've been studying in small chunks over and over, instead of practicing for the game the night before, you've been practicing for several weeks. Instead of practicing for this particular concept of demand and supply the night before, you've been looking at it repeatedly over the last 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to learn more. To some degree, even forgetting a little bit. The fact that you learned something on Monday, you forgot a bit by Wednesday, and then you had to relearn it, right? That reinforces learning, and then actually makes learning more long-term and deeper. Partly, one of the reasons that it works is because as time goes by, you're able to see more of the connections. You studied demand and supply on Monday, and then you started talking about something different on Friday. And now you see the connection between elasticity and demand and supply in a way that you wouldn't have necessarily if you had studied all in the same block right before the test. Another part is this idea of self-testing in the same way that you might do scrimmages in practice before a test, before the real big game. You want to pretend that you're doing the real thing, right? You want to take this practice test minimum many times with a minimum performance is what I want in my exam, right? It's not that you're just taking the practice test over and over and over and over and really getting bad grades every single time. In my classes, I have this a minimum level that you must score a minimum amount, otherwise you're not really deemed to have passed this practice. You have to move on. It's important not to give the right answer, so they have to go back and figure out what the right answer might be. Just last week, I had this student that took the practice test 21 times before he was able to actually get the minimum value. And the problem is that in previous 20 times, he was just taking it over and over and over and over and over and over without actually trying to figure out what he did wrong in problem 7, without going back to the reading and without asking the teacher or his classmates. It's just taking over and over and over. And of course, if you do exactly the same thing 21 times, you're going to get exactly the same result. The 21st time, he actually, after I told him many times to do this, he finally went back to the reading, figured out what the right answer was, and was able to take the test. One result of self-testing is that it builds confidence. I can take the real test and I'll probably do well because I have taken a self-test already, and I've taken something similar in coverage, similar in form and length, similar in difficulty in grading standards, so that you can really say, I'm not going to be taking some totally unknown test. I've done something like it. I don't know, drawn from the same test bank or something like that, right? This allows for something else from educational psychology, more retrieval and bringing back knowledge that you have forgotten and reinforcing. And I'm kind of building on the idea of mastery learning, right? And this is a picture from the image that you see on your screen is from a fairly standard paper on mastery learning. So I'm an expert on mastery learning, and I'm somewhat following this idea of mastery learning. I give some formative assessment, a learning check that I'll explain in a minute, And people who do fine in it then can just move on and move on to the next unit. People who do badly in it, they realize what they've done badly. They give an opportunity to do it better. They get an opportunity to go back to the source and do it better, and then move on. So what I did in my microeconomics courses is that I had self-testing, right? Every single chapter section had a learning check, right? I told you this answer is incorrect, but because the way that I structure my Canvas course, my learning management system course, the learning check came right after the video, right after the reading. So if you actually wanted to know what the right answer was, the right answer would just be in one of the pages that you just read, right? You could take it as many times as you wanted, but there's an 80% minimum score in the learning checks. In the summer class, there's a 7-week summer class. Every day there was a video, a lecture and check, video reading and check, video reading and check. And in the fall, it was more spread out. Every 2 or 3 days, there was a check. The idea being that you're going to be learning these things in a space sort of way. This is penalty for late submissions. And it's almost mastery, not quite there. There's a couple of things that weren't there, like no enrichment activities, and I did not give extremely detailed feedback. However, following the idea of mastery learning, I would have given initial high quality instruction for a very, very good video with opportunity for feedback and correction. And then followed with a learning check and repeated formative assessment to test for mastery, right? And so I'm going to use the word mastery here, even though it's not 100% mastery, just kind of as a label for what I did. This is what the course would look like. So if you are looking at chapter 4 on elasticity, chapter 4 on elasticity had a lecture, a reading, and a check. A lecture, a reading, and a check. A lecture, a reading, and a check. And then there would be 2 practice tests. One of them had minimum standard, and then you would take the test. And as you can see here, I set it up so that you had to complete all of these assignments in this order. Otherwise, you were not able to move on to the next set of lecture, reading, and checks without having passed the previous one. And you cannot get to the test. Like I'm sure you've experienced sometimes the student just shows up to the test expecting that, in his natural brilliance and being more or less awake during lectures, he's just going to be able to do well. And otherwise, it's the fault of the teacher. In this class, you couldn't really actually show up to the test without having enough preparation. So I'm going to drill down a bit more into the details now. These prerequisites were relatively easy. That were lectures with embedded easy quizzes. Most of what I was looking for is some level of attention. The readings had to be viewed. There was a grade on it that you could go from 0 to 100%, and there was no minimum standard there. But then you had this check, right? And you had to score a minimum of 80%, 8 out of 10. And there was a 4% penalty for every day late. Up to 20% penalty. So every day that you missed it, you lost a 0.4 all the way down to 8 points. So by the time that you get to the 5th day, you need a perfect score to move forward. In the test, there was something like a C minus. In the practice test, it was C minus minimum standard. So you had to score. And sometimes I would get students saying, "Oh, I'm not able to practice the practice test. Is there any way for you to just unlock it and let me take the real one?" I said, "Look, if you can't pass a practice test that is open book, right? If you can't, in repeated attempts, you can't get a C minus, for goodness sakes, in an open book practice test, how can you possibly do well in the real one, right?" And normally what would happen is that I would get students complaining that they're not able to practice. Is it possible? And then actually being very happy with the result. And yes, I was finally able to pass. Thank you so much. Because people actually, at the end of the day, like succeeding in things. And in this system, either was revelatory for the students who didn't do the work and expected to pass by osmosis, or was encouraging and confidence building for students who were able to do it. So in terms of the amount of work, every section, lecture, reading, and check took about an hour and a half of work. The summer class was entirely online. The fall class was on campus, but we had COVID, of course, like everybody else did, interrupted in different ways. So the Panopto videos that I used, here I'm giving you a screenshot of what that would look like. And so you had not exactly slides, these were Microsoft Word documents that I would talk through, and with embedded quizzes. And this is the way that the quizzes worked. As you can see here, they could retake it. They saw what the grade was. I gave them the right answer. So it was possible, it was relatively easy for them to get 100% here. The point of this was not to catch people. The point of this was to merely make sure they were paying attention and that some sediment was beginning to build into their brains as they watched the lecture, right? The next thing was these Perusal Readings, and Perusal is a free platform. You upload your reading, which could be what I have here as something. I basically wrote the textbook for this class. I just put together very elaborate lecture notes, and that's the textbook. And as you're seeing part of it, and you just upload it here to Perusal. And you put in the actual textbook that you're using, either your Smith and Jones, the 6th edition. That could be the reading. It could be videos. It could be other things, right? So the way that this works is that the student goes into the reading, selects part of the reading, and writes comments on it, right? And you're seeing here an example of the back and forth between students as they try to answer what monopolists are. Obviously, this doesn't belong to this reading here, but they're just different readings. You could set very detailed settings, right? So in this particular case, you get more points for more substantial, detailed comments. So simply answering yes is not going to get you any points. That's a 0. If you just say yes or true or I agree, that's a 0. So I'm giving you examples here of comments that got more points. So these people here got either full points or close to full points. Sometimes people get more points by writing comments that get more responses, that more people say things about that, right? Or that get upvoted. You get more points by reading more of the pages. You get more points by opening the assignment more times, kind of on the spacing idea. By instead of putting all your comments on the top page, putting your comments all through the reading, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is basically, we struggle with this all the time. They're supposed to read chapter 3. Did they read chapter 3? At what level of attention did they really read chapter 3? And on the basic idea that whoever does the work does the learning, I'm basically creating a system here for making sure that they do more work while they're reading. And then came the check. That was on Canvas. And like I say here, okay, I told them to do the reading. These are actually instructions that were in the check. This is what you need to do. In order to pass, you must score at least 80%. You get unlimited attempts. And one neat feature that the new quizzes have on Canvas is that you can have a little cooling period between attempts. So the typical thing, the student knows they have to do multiple attempts, it just takes it, 30 seconds later, takes it again, 30 seconds later, takes it again. Perhaps in a multiple choice question type thing, it says A, okay, let's try B, let's try C, let's try D. But putting in something of a cooling period, I am trying to encourage them to use that time to go back and figure out what the right answer was. Some students, of course, did not use the time that way, right? They probably went back to YouTube or to playing the video game in the meantime. But I'm trying to give you every opportunity to use the feedback that you're getting to learn more, right? And explaining very clearly, I'm not trying to just annoy you. Maybe I am trying to annoy you, but that's not the only reason. I am trying to make sure that you learn something, right? And so it would look like this. Some students got it right at the first, or got enough of a score at the first time and boom, moved on. Some students didn't pass, so to speak, in the first time. They needed 80%, but pushed all the way up to 100%, right? And you can see some people might have just gone in the first time, got 10%, and that's all they did. And some people and then kept going. So you see some examples there. There's people who tried it a lot of times. And some people are able to do it right the first time. You got the 10 minutes. this is the feedback that they got. They could see what they got wrong, but I did not give them the right answer. I did not give them the right answer. They had to figure it out. Hopefully they figured it out, right? And every once in a while I had a student say, you know what, I got the right answer. I know that, I mean, the answer comes out to be B, but I don't understand why it's B. And those students tend to do better. Obviously, the students that try to figure out why the right answer was. Some of the questions were multiple choice. Some of the questions were numerical. Some of the questions were multiple answer. So select all that apply. Some of the questions were multiple drop down, and so on. I tried to vary it a lot. The practice quizzes, each section, so you had 2 chapters, quizzes, 4 chapters is a test. Of course, microeconomics is cumulative kind of by its nature. You had to get at least a 70% in the first practice test. The second practice test was purely for extra credit. Actually, I did give extra credit for doing it, like a 4 points altogether. If you took all of the practices altogether, there was 4 points to the grade. So that could move you from 88 to 92 altogether. But the second one was purely free. The first one was required. So you had to get at least a C- in order to move forward. And like I say here, the median was 3 practice test attempts and 4 practice quiz attempts, right? So people tried it. Some people did it well the first time. Some people had to do it 11 times until they're able to do it. And you can see that there's some distribution here, right? Exactly same number of questions, exactly same time limits, 30 minutes for for a quiz, 30 minutes for a practice quiz. Drawn from the same test bank. The real quiz, the real test, I had a fixed set of questions, right? So everybody got the same quiz and the same test. And I was obviously using proctoring software to make sure that there was no cheating. But for the practice one, it was the same kind of questions drawn from the same test bank, right? So the idea is that if you took this practice test and you got a B+ in the practice test, you could be pretty certain that you probably will be scoring something like a B+ in the practice test. And when I run regressions here, I found that, as you can imagine, the scores of the practice exams were positively correlated with the real value, with the real scores, and the number of attempts was negatively correlated. Now that one is a little bit worrisome. If they were using these practice tests for improvement, you should end up with no correlation between the number of attempts and the final score once you control for the scores. But the fact that students, that the number of attempts was negatively correlated clearly means that they're not really using it enough to learn, right? They're just taking it 21 times until they finally get the score, and then they do badly in the real test. So that's kind of disappointing that way. So I have to make it, perhaps give a bit more encouragement to do it better. So how did this gatekeeping work? How did the gatekeeping work? In practice, they were told, look, you can move forward. Canvas actually enforced this can't move forward. Most students, you know what, more or less did what they were supposed to do, more or less on time, and showed up to the test perfectly ready. Some of them would fall behind and would show up to the test having a couple of checks to complete, perhaps the practice test still undone, even though there was this penalty, trying to make sure that they didn't cram. Some of them, they would show, you know, the class is at 10:10. They would show up at 10:10 with a lot of the preparatory work still to be done. They would spend the hour trying to finally catch up, and some of them will finally make it and take the test in the last 15 minutes and obviously do badly. Some of them, by the time that the test was over, were not done yet, and it's okay, well, fine. Come to my office now, and I'll let you take the test now. There's going to be a penalty, a 4% penalty. Don't do it again. And normally people would learn the lesson. Normally, and so I would see a lot of this behavior in the beginning of the semester, perhaps testing if it was really serious about it. And then as the semester wore on, I would see less of this kind of behavior. Some students, you know what, they would not take me up on it. And I would say, okay, well, fine. I'll give you till midnight. I'll maybe take it to midnight to finally do this. And they would start the practice test at 11:45, and of course they would never get it. So it, like I was saying before, it had this revelatory effect, right? It's not that the teacher was unfair. It's not that the test was too hard. It's that I just did not do my preparing. It's not that I didn't do my preparing. And I have to be perfectly honest with you. I was communicating with the dean quite a bit along this. You know what? Mr. Dean, I need to tell you that this is what I'm doing, and I'm trying to push against Coast and Cram. And I have to say, I have a great dean, because he responded at one point saying about a particular student, you know what, this student, he's not the Coast and Cram kind of student, he's the Coast and not Cram kind of student. So you're fine, in other words. But I have to tell you that I gave full information to the administration. This is what I'm doing, and if you see a lot of W's, this is why they're happening, because I am trying to make sure that they actually learn. And for them, for a lot of them, was a valuable life lesson. And they did. A lot of them did realize, okay, this is how I need to change. So summarizing really quickly: high quality instruction, small check, and the reading. They had to do a learning check that gave them feedback and correction, and then there was a practice exam. And what I was trying to do is to give them mastery and confidence, and a real sense of preparation. And so the question is, did this actually work? Right? What was the actual effect? What I would expect is that A students, people who come in, given their GPA, given their previous experience with other economics courses, given the experience with previous math courses, given their, I don't know, their class level, given what they know and what they don't know, the better students, so to speak, people who come in and I can predict using my regression that they're probably going to get something like an A, I'm going to predict that this system is probably unnecessary, right? It probably makes very little difference. For people kind of in the middle, my guess would be that this would either help them a lot or cause them to not, and certainly people at the bottom, this should cause them to change their personality almost and become really good students, because I've given them the encouragement to become better students, or cause them to withdraw. Right? So this are the raw results. Right? These are other instructors that taught the class. This is me in 2019 teaching the regular way, so to speak. And this is my class. You can see that the median was lower, but there were more higher grades in this. Obviously, the question that I have is, well, but how do I know that they have the same quality students? I actually had the same tests. I actually had the same tests in 19 and in 20, but did I have the same quality of students? So I want to control for GPA and preparation. I want to include a dummy for the instructor and the regression. I want to worry about COVID and things like that, assuming that is probably going to bias the results downward, and so on. So what I'm doing is I am in my university, I am the director of online education, so I have access to a great deal of data through the LMS and through our registrar and whatnot. So I have large amounts of data, which I'm very grateful that they made available to me. And so I basically ran regressions on all of these different things, right? And what I found is that by and large, GPA was the strongest predictor of actual grades in my class. Having taken macroeconomics previously, some experience with economics, weekly predicted success, and the 2019 course, so somehow the instructor effect, the Martinez effect, was a little bit bouncing downward, but not significantly, right? And so what I do is I take this model of predicted grades to predict out of sample the 43 grades in the 2020 courses. Okay, so if you want to know the statistics, this is what I did precisely, but in the interest of time, I'll skip it. And so what I do is I divide the class into thirds. There is the A student, the A or A minus student predicted grades. Here are the B's, B minus, BB plus, and this is C plus to F, okay? And we're looking at non-mastery courses. This is exactly the same graph that you saw at the beginning of the presentation. So you see that in the A, people who are predicted to get A's or A minuses, you saw some variation. There were certainly some A's, but even some, what is this? This is a B minus. In the B range, there was all the way from a C to an A. In the C plus to F range, you saw all of this variation. So this is not in the mastery courses, right? In the regular courses. In the mastery courses, if you're an A student, you got an A. If you're an A or an A minus student, there were no non-A grades in my class. Compare that to the non-mastery courses in which there was some variation, right? If you came in, given your GPA and your preparation and all these different things, you came in and you probably were going to get an A in this class, you got an A in this class. If you're going to get an A minus in this class, you got an A in this class. If you came in predicted to be in the B range, whereas in the regular course, in the regular courses, you could have gotten anywhere from an A to a C. There was also some spread in my course in these mastery courses, but it was all crammed all upward. So you might say something like a 2/3 of a letter grade improvement among these middle students. In the lower range students, the median is basically identical, and there certainly are quite a few more W's and failures. Right here, I have the numbers. In the regular courses, the proportion of W's or F's was 19%. In the master course, it was 31%. Right, get whatever conclusions, draw whatever conclusions that you might like to draw this. Why is it that in my courses it was, if you came in at this low level, you were more likely to fail than in the regular courses, fail or withdraw, right? And you can see this better perhaps in these histograms, that if you're in the B range, B minus, B plus, there are more better grades, and there's also some lower grades in the mastery courses. Among the lower range students, in a way, one way to look at this graph is that it's a hollowing out of the middle. If you were a lower third kind of student, it's unlikely you got a D. You either withdrew or you got a B, right? So it's a kind of a splitting of the Red Sea. There's a splitting going on here. The students were pushed in either doing much better than you would have thought or much worse than you would have thought. Let me just skip this one. So then I want to ask, what explains? Why is it that some people did so much better than you would have predicted? And being an economist here, of course, I'm going to run regressions, and I'm saying, you know what? So what explains overperformance? Or what if you came in predicted to earn a B, what explains the fact that you got a B plus or that you got a C plus? And what explains the variation along and around the prediction, right? So this is basically the residual in the previous regression, if you're into these sorts of things. And I tried to predict this overperformance using the grades in different assignments, figuring out whether you did this in a timely manner, in just how much time you spend working. Maybe the reason that people are doing well in these classes, they're just spending enormous amounts of time, and the reason they're not doing well is because they're spending very little time. As you could imagine, if you're doing well in the reading, you're probably also doing well in the lectures and in the checks. So I'm just going to put in the reading grades as my explanatory variable here. That's what I'm going to show, right? I find that, so in kind of definition here, what does it mean to be late? It means that you'll probably end up doing more attempts because of the penalty on checks and practice. Being late means you got a 0 on the readings. Because of the structure of the class, you couldn't really just skip a lot of homework because if you skipped this homework, you couldn't do the next one, right? So that's not the reason. That's not what missing means. Missing actually means that you tried less often, right? That you tried fewer times. So what I find here, summarizing in words, I'm going to show you the table in a minute, in case you're interested in the table, but summarizing in words, what I find is that if you're in the middle group, right, not in the C plus to F group, but if you're in the middle group, then reading grades were the better predictor of your overperformance. If you kind of skimped on the reading and you didn't put a lot of details in there, you probably didn't do too well. If you put a lot of effort into the reading, you probably did better, right? If you likewise in the, am I looking at the right thing? Yeah, likewise for the middle group, the percentage of late assignments also, having more late assignments lowered your grade, as you would imagine, but it's a less important predictor variable. Reading is a lot more important. For the lower group, for the C plus, D, F predicted people, for them, how well you did in the practice test predicted whether you went to a W or an F, or you went to a B, right? If you're in the lower group, doing better in the practice was a better predictor, and also missing fewer assignments. In other words, trying more often. Trying more often was a better predictor of your performance in the class. So in case you're interested, and the last point here, simply putting in more hours into Canvas was not a particularly good predictor of your grades, whether by themselves or in combination with anything else. Simply, this is not the reason that people are doing well or badly in this class is not because I'm squeezing more hours out of them. That's not the reason. The reason they're doing well or badly is because they're getting better grades in the reading or getting better grades in the practice tests and things like that. So in case you're interested, here are the regressions, and kind of to back up what I was saying. I said at the beginning of the talk, if you could put um, uh, your affiliation and what you do in your institution on the Q&A, I'd really appreciate it. I'd like to get a sense of who you are. I'd really appreciate it. So yeah, as you can see, reading grades and practice test grades tended to be fairly significant, and you begin to see this, that the reading grades and late assignments are more important in predicting B range students, and the practice tests and the number of missing assignments tend to be more important in predicting the lower range students. All right. I also did this in a different class, and I want to move quickly because of the time. I did this in a different class, and it seemed to have the same kind of pattern more or less showed up there. I'll just show this one graph here that for the upper range student that improved their grades, and beautifully, actually, this is somewhat surprisingly, for the lower range students, you see this massive improvement in their scores. I had much fewer failures than in the regular classes among the lower ones. Basically, it made no difference for the B range people, but for the lower range people, it drastically improved their grades, and it certainly improved the grades of the A range people. So, conclusion here. On average, the middling and weaker students did better on average by 2/3 of a letter grade. Of course, we're talking about a relatively small sample size. Perhaps improving grades by 2/3 of a letter grade. You know what I mean? If you think about it, it makes the difference between keeping that scholarship and not keeping that scholarship. It can make a pretty big difference. Going from a B minus to a B plus, it's not insignificant. In addition to that, because of the structure of spacing and self-testing and the self-explanation through the readings and whatnot, these are really good things. So quite possibly this leads to better long-term learning. It almost for sure leads to better work habits, right? Having a habit of doing work day in and day out rather than cramming at the end is almost surely good for you as a person. And so that's the end of my presentation, and I would love to hear your questions.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel, for that presentation. I love to hear that you're setting up your students for success. So if anybody does have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I did notice that we had some people here mentioning where they're from. So we have someone from Boston. We have the University Faculty of Agriculture. They teach the principles of microeconomic or of economics, I'm sorry. Michigan, Wayne State University, Student Support Coordinator for the Center of Excellence in Equity in Mathematics. We have someone from Southwest Minnesota State University, Bernard Goldband, Rutgers University. We have someone who teaches math at a small rural college. We have someone who is an assistant professor of mathematics at Upper Iowa University, teaches college algebra, trigonometry, elementary statistics, and calculus. She leaves early to teach in-person class, but she has to leave early to teach an in-person class. Right. She found your talk very informative and has had very similar issues with students not engaging in the online class until the day before the exam, so thank you. We did have a question come in so far. Let me find that one here. What are your reading?
So the readings that I assign in the class are, so this is the story. I started using a regular textbook, and I would have PowerPoints, and then eventually I developed these PowerPoints. I got tired of PowerPoint and I started using just Word documents, and this is what I would present. Eventually, my PowerPoints went from being just very small bullet points to more elaborate bullet points to paragraphs. I would share my notes, and eventually my notes were just as good as the textbook, and they were cheaper. So that at a cost of zero instead of, so I decided I spent most of last year of just reworking my notes so that they now look like a textbook. And that's both what I presented during the videos and what I had. Actually, not in the videos, I would have a shorter version of the readings. And in the what I had them read was the actual was the my textbook, so to speak.
Thank you.
So I noticed that some of you are teach microeconomics or teach economics. Um, most of and most of you are teach other things like mathematics and whatnot. And as you can see, this system is obviously I used it for economics, but it's not particularly economics exclusive, right? You could use it for all sorts of things, certainly for math, right? Of having of recording a video of yourself explaining chapter 3, making sure that they actually read the math textbook. That would be a new one, and then have them work in the classroom on the checks. Typically, what I did in the in-person class in the fall is that I had them work on the checks, and I would walk around. So something of a flipped classroom thing. I would walk around helping them with the checks.
Yes, thank you. And it's interesting that you mentioned requiring the reading. I know that's something that we hear from instructors all the time is finding a way to require them to read. And how do you do that? I actually was personally interested in that. How does the grading work with the comments? Is that something you set up a
Yeah.
rubric for and then it automatically grades, or you manually grade the comments?
This is I have to say that if you have not heard of Perusal, uh, check it out right now, because it is a thing of beauty. It really is a wonderful thing. It's basically artificial intelligence that is doing this reading. So being artificial intelligence rather than me, I'm sure that it makes judgments that if AI can make judgments, it gives points that I wouldn't have given. But you can see perhaps a little bit on the screen here of how the grading happens, right? People get points for the quality of their annotations. People get points for, and so the quality of annotation is obviously the most important one. And what you tend to see is more elaborate answers get more points. Now, obviously, Perusal doesn't know economics, so the answers may be wrong. And here I'm relying on the fact that this is collaborative. Johnny puts his answer there, and then Anne, because she wants to get points, and the way that you get points is by saying things, says, "Oh, Johnny actually is not quite like that." Right? Let me correct what your misperception here. This is what you actually mean to say. And I've seen that I keep using Perusal in my classes, and I keep seeing this being used, and exactly this happening. Somebody says something, and the next person says, "Actually, I think that the right answer is this." Right? And so they can correct themselves and can correct each other. They can tag you. So I constantly get emails through Perusal that Anne has a question, says at Gabriel Martinez, and ask me a question. Can you answer this for us? We're getting confused here. So I'll go in and I'll correct that. But normally I just leave them alone. Normally I let them talk to each other and correct each other. And so obviously sometimes they're not going to get it right. They're going to get it systematically wrong. And that's what the lecture is for. Um, but it really works out very nicely. That so again, the basic idea is that the main component of the grade is the elaborateness and the amount of detail in their answers, right? And then there's other categories here of how much of the reading did they actually read? Did they spread the comments throughout the reading? Did they answer other people? How long did they spend on the assignment? You can change the weights. You can change the weights of these different things. So
Thank you
I
for
would
sharing.
really strongly recommend this.
Yeah. We have one other here. I have done mastery quizzing for a while now as a bonus activity and often observe point differences of 10 or even 20 points between students using this tool and those not using it. It occurs to me now that I should require it, with perhaps a bonus given if students reach an A+ criteria.
Yeah, yeah. No, in And so I was talking to some, actually, the professor next door who teaches mathematics, and what he has in his class is that there's practice exams that are optional, not required, but they're optional. So as you can imagine, the better students are the ones who take the optional practice exam. So it's the kind of piling on of good things. They're already good students. They're taking the practice exam, and therefore they're going to do better on the exam. The worst students are not going to do anything. They didn't learn anything. They didn't get the practice. They're not going to. So it requiring it, and okay, well, I did it. I did badly. That does do something, right? If you did the practice exam and did badly, at least you know that you're not actually prepared. You don't walk into the test thinking that you know. You know that you don't know, right? So I have this additional mean thing of requiring a minimum standard, which I'll tell you, people hate it until they pass. When they pass, they really appreciate it. But until they pass, they are just banging the and to some degree the problem is, and this is what you want to work against. What all they're doing is they're banging their heads against the wall, taking it over and over and over. I need to come up with a better system of making sure that they understand that after taking it the first time and not passing or passing, right? What they need to do is to figure out what they got right, go back to the reading, figure out why it is right? And what they got wrong, go back to the reading and figure out why it is wrong. And that's the only way that it really works for learning here. And I'm not sure that they're really taking advantage of that well enough. And that's really what the mastery system is not just minimum standards or it is feedback and correction.
Yes, so important. Thank you. Well, it looks like we are at the end of our time. So thank you, Gabriel, for all of the valuable information that you've shared with us today. I am going to launch a quick 3-question poll on the presentation we just watched. So I know we're at our time, but if you have a few minutes to quickly send us your feedback, I will launch that here now.
And if you have any questions for me, my email is gmartinez at avemaria.edu. gmartinez at avemaria.edu.
All right, I'll put it in the chat room. gmartinez@avemaria.edu. All right, it's in the chat room for you all. So thank you for taking your time to fill out our poll, and thank you for your time, Gabriel. The next concurrent sessions will begin at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can view the chat here shortly once I enter it for session meeting room links, or you can access our conference website for a complete list of our concurrent sessions and their descriptions. Don't forget, while accessing our conference website, you can swing by the exhibit hall and say hello to the Hawks team, view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and you can be entered to win the hourly giveaway, which includes your choice of a smart pen, standing desk, or $100 Amazon gift card. So we look forward to seeing you at your next session.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.